Hello, I'm Lucy Alderslow from Children in Permaculture, the Permaculture Association. I've wanted to start with asking you a couple of questions. So first is, where are you? And have you heard of permaculture before? Okay, so I think it'll take a few seconds for that. So whilst I do that, I'll start sharing my screen. So yeah, the title of today's talk is How Permaculture Can Help Save the World. So the first thing we will talk about is, what is permaculture? So for those who haven't heard of it before, it's putting together initially of the two words permanent and agriculture, and also permanent culture. So it's about sustainability. So what I did was I put together a bunch of different definitions of permaculture and created this word cloud. So it's about design for sustainable living. And you can see it's all about systems and systems thinking, including within that ecosystems. And it's about meeting humans' needs, things like shelter and food and health and well-being, in a way that integrates humans harmoniously with the landscape. So it's about meeting material and non-material needs. This is a definition that I wrote together in our book, which is this one, Earth Care, People Care and Fair Share in Education, the Children in Permaculture Manual. And it is that permaculture is a design system that creates resilient, sustainable relationships between human beings and the rest of the natural world. I think an interesting thing is to think of humans as part of the natural world and embedded within that. Permaculture is based on these three core ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share. So earth care is, it's a big thing. It's about the whole planet Earth. And it's also a small thing. It's the earth, the soil beneath our feet, which is broken up, as you know, into tiny, tiny parts. So it's both big scale and small scale. And that reflects permaculture, really. When we're doing earth care, we're thinking, how can we reduce our negative impact on the planet? And also, how can we increase our positive impact on the planet? So addressing the massive questions like the climate emergency and addressing what might seem like smaller questions like how to improve the soil underneath this tree, all together and at once, and thinking of those two things at once. So people care is about looking after yourself and about looking after other people. If we don't look after people, then people will try to meet their needs in a way that might not be an earth care way. And the third one is fair share. I think children from an early age can understand about the need for being fair. So it's about equity. What is some sort of equality between myself and you? What about between me and someone in Malawi? Or between me and the slugs? How can we have some equality between us and the slugs that would otherwise eat all our food? What you can do is just fence off or protect from the slugs some of your plants and allow the slugs to eat others. So you can actually have that fair share between you and other species. If you just killed all the slugs in your garden, then all the other things that eat slugs, like especially the birds, I was watching a blackbird yesterday eating a slug, they won't have food and they'll go elsewhere. And then when the slugs come back, the birds won't come back. So looking after all the species together gives you that fair share. Did any answers come in there? Okay, so how can permaculture save the world? So I'm going to talk about these four pictures in turn, what's going on in the planet today. So the first one here is extinction. So currently, as I expect you know, we are in the world's sixth mass extinction, which is underway at the moment. Oh, great. Oh, I've just got an answer in. So someone's heard the word of permaculture, but not what it means. So hopefully that explanation's helped you to make it a bit clearer. And we have people in London and the South Coast. Excellent, great. Well, I'm in southwest Scotland, so a bit far away from you there, but on the same island. Yeah. So the extinction. So the biggest cause of this mass extinction which we are currently experiencing is habitat loss. So species that just don't have a place to live anymore. Permaculture integrates people into the landscape in a way that promotes life in all its forms. This means that it's about having people living together with animals rather than saying this is only for people and this is only for animals, where you spray, kill with insecticides and other pesticides, huge areas of land. It's like, how do we integrate together and live together harmoniously? So that's a nice picture of, a nearby forest near me, where we went on a school trip. And it's also, you'll notice, relates to the UN Sustainable Development Goal about life on land, about all life. This is a picture of a great crested newt, which is an endangered species that we found in the Peace Garden as we were creating it. And so we created a habitat for that crested newt within the school grounds and actually improved the school grounds and improved the habitat for them to live there. So this next one is about air pollution and climate chaos. So I'm sure you know air is cleaned by trees. So wherever we can plant trees. So carbon is captured by soils in polycultures and techniques like mob grazing, where you move animals every day, enabling the land to regenerate, which is much more like what would happen in nature. Because in natural systems, grazers would have predators which keep them moving, but close together. And that's those systems of polycultures, mob grazing, and other things that we do in permaculture. We're really looking after the soil. And so this is about improving soil health and soil life. And therefore, we're capturing carbon in the soil. So we have better, healthier plants. And if you have healthier, the reason you have healthier plants is because what farmers often do is spray with fertilizers, the three main things that plants need, so nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And they don't think about all the other nutrients that the plants also need, the micronutrients as well as the macronutrients. And then we eat those plants and they don't have as many nutrients in them. So actually, by feeding the soil a complete system, you feed the plants, therefore you feed yourself with better nutrients, and all the other animals, whether they're sort of herbivores, vegetarians, or whether they're the predators of those, and everything will have more nutrients. If you look after the soil nutrients, you will have more nutrients all around. So this is an example of a polyculture. So poly being the opposite of monoculture. Monoculture is where you grow one species of plant in large areas. So mono, poly, many. And that's where you might grow lots of different species of plants all together. So this is an example of a polyculture, which is a food forest, where you're providing food for people and other species all together. You can see in this system, this is a forest garden or a food forest, two words for the same thing, in the southeast of Scotland in Coldstream. What you can see in it is that there's no naked soil. When you leave soil naked, nature goes, oh no, I'm naked. Nature comes along, puts lots of seeds in, tries to grow stuff, cover the soil. Soil is meant to be covered. It's not meant to be without a blanket of some sort. So either by mulching, which is where you put a layer of organic matter on the top of the soil, or by covering it with plants. That is a really good system. That's looking after your soil. So it's also about meeting our own needs through low carbon solutions. People often associate permaculture with food forests like this, and it is that, and it is more as well. It can be applied to any part of your life, including, for example, how you heat your home, how you cook. So you could do that from coppice wood. This is a food forest. You can see that you could cut through coppicing. So you cut a tree where you cut a tree just above the ground level, and then it grows again. So deciduous trees will grow again. They actually live much longer like that. It's also about making products to last, maintain and repair. You can see there's so many different things that you get from this food forest, apart from food. You know, you can dye your clothes from it, for example, from the plants. Or, you know, you can make baskets as well. So there's lots of diverse things you can get from this system. This is the outdoor classroom in our local school. You can see it's just surrounded. Why, you know, what a beautiful place to learn. And this is about integrating species, including the human species, with lots of birds that love those plants, both as a place for nest and also as food sources, as well as improving the soil. So that's a much healthier classroom all round. Here's another problem, droughts and famine. So we talked about planting trees. Trees actually attract rain, so they help. By planting trees, a lot of desertification, that's where we're getting more not deserts, unfortunately, deserts. Is actually caused by cutting down trees. So what you can do is to have these polycultures in which you're integrating trees into the system. This is a picture showing the difference between the monoculture and the polyculture, which I think is nice. So permaculture is based on the ethics I mentioned and also on principles. So this is one of those principles, integrate rather than segregate. So how do we integrate different things together? So there's different species of plant here, but also animals, birds, insects are all living together. This system, the monoculture system, is really good for machines. This system, the polyculture, is really good for people and planet and all different species. This actually shows, I think this is an interesting diagram because it shows you how you actually require, although you actually get more product from a polyculture than from a monoculture. So this top one is about a monoculture plus of grain here and a monoculture of fruit here. It's very simplistic. It's just putting these two things together. And it just shows you that 1 hectare of polyculture produces as much grain and fruit together as 1.4 hectares of monoculture. So you actually require less land if you're growing using these different layers, because they're actually, you know, the grain is using a different layer from the trees. Their roots are in different places, and obviously above the ground they're in different places as well. So this edible forest garden that I showed you a picture of earlier, it's Graham and Nancy's. Graham Bell lives in Coldstream in southeast Scotland, and it's only 1/5 of an acre, which is, you know, a medium-sized sort of suburban garden. It's not a huge garden, and yet they're managing to produce a ton of food and more in a year. You see all that lovely soft fruit that has been collected in an hour. These people came around to see the garden, and within an hour they collected all that soft fruit and just, yeah, incredible amount of produce. This is another diagram that explains to you about forest gardens. We talk about 7 layers of a forest garden, which you can see in this diagram. The point of that is it's about mimicking. Permaculture is about copying nature and applying that to our designs. So you can see that most clearly in this food forest system, because our native habitat in the UK is a forest. It's naturally a forest. That's what you would normally find if humans hadn't been interacting. And the forest has these 7 layers. So this helps you just to think, oh, what layers could I integrate? How could I increase? Instead of the 2-dimensional figure of the monoculture, how can I increase and include that 3rd dimension? So So these are some benefits of an edible forest garden. We've talked about food for people, and you think, oh, of course, a forest garden, that's a bit like an orchard where you might just have fruit. But of course, we have lots and lots of fruit. Also have lots and lots of salad. Graham always talks about a 60 different species salad. You can, so many salads have got 3 species, haven't you? But, your lettuce, tomatoes, and cucumber. But every different type of plant has different nutrients in it. So the more different types of plants that you can eat, the healthier you will be, because the more balanced nutrition you will have. And so you'll have this big benefit of different salads and huge amount of different vegetables. We always think of vegetables as the standard things you can get in the shop, but there's a huge diversity, much more different types of plants that you could be eating as your vegetables. And a lot of them are perennials. So perennial being sort of the opposite of annuals. You get annual plants are ones that you sow the seed in the spring and you harvest them in the autumn. They only live for one season. Whereas perennials are things which live for a long time, like trees and shrubs. So using perennials in the food forest, it saves you work. That's a really important thing. It's just less work. If you don't have to prepare the ground and sow seeds every single year, you're saving yourself work. I put another example of here is eggs. So I mentioned slugs because people always ask me about slugs. Oh, what about the slugs? And so Bill Mollison, who's a co-founder of Permaculture, would say, you don't have too many slugs, you have too few ducks. There's different types of ducks, like Indian runner ducks, for example, that really love to eat slugs. So they're great to have to integrate, with a small pond area, obviously, to meet their needs, but to integrate them within your garden. Also, we talk about wood. There's trees, so you got wood, so you got heating your home. We've talked about baskets and so on. In Graham's garden, he has solar panels as well. It's so much better for biodiversity. We're talking about integrating people into the landscape, having birds, so many different types of birds and insects that live there, as well as carbon capture within the soil, I mentioned, and within the trees themselves. It's a low maintenance system, which is resilient, including climate resilient. So whilst we don't want the climate emergency and we want to, reduce carbon emissions, our climate is constantly changing, and it is changing anyway already. So climate resilience in a garden and in food systems is very important. In the UK, we might be getting hotter because we think, oh, climate change, global warming, that means it's going to get hotter. But because there's obviously weather from one year to the next can be very extreme, but also because the Gulf Stream may be redirected, it might get colder in the UK. So having lots of different species of plants reduces the problems of pests. So you won't get one pest that will just decimate everything like locusts. And also it is more climate resilient. So maybe one tree doesn't do well yet one year, but it does well the next year. So that you've got food, you've got something to eat every year. So that's that climate resilience, that ability for the garden to still keep on feeding you despite whatever the weather conditions are from one year to the next. There's loads of benefits to people. Education, you get to do lots of learning from nature in the food forest, as well as mental health benefits, which are massive. I know in lockdown, there's been even an increase in mental health crises, which we already had. So spending time in the garden is so good for you. There's also benefits for health and exercise. It's good for you. I can keep going and going about all the benefits to people of being outside and in nature. But we're going to talk about floods now. So so what about floods? Well, the prevalent flood prevention systems in the UK are about using concrete. So let's build these huge concrete structures to physically as a barrier to stop the river from flooding this area of our land. That is actually exacerbating the problem. So it makes the problem worse and worse, because cement is actually a big carbon polluter. 8% of the worldwide carbon dioxide emissions come from cement. which is the main ingredient of concrete, or the important ingredient. So actually, by using cement and concrete systems, you're actually causing problems of flooding. So what are the positive permaculture solutions? Are tree planting, and as you can see, it's not hard. People of all ages can do it. So tree planting in the river catchment. Imagine like the entire valley actually needs to be managed thinking about the water, the hydrology. So a blanket bog on the uplands, like I heard a wee talk earlier there from kids from Cumbria, you know, their area should all be blanket bogs up in the uplands, and looking at holistic management of the whole landscape. There's a study being done in Wales in which they found that 67 times more water is absorbed on land with trees versus grazed pasture. So where you have, because of the roots of the trees, the water trickles down the roots and actually is held by the soil. So the soil is much richer. It's more full of organic matter, so it holds more water compared to compacted soil, which has been heavily farmed with machinery, as well as infiltrating into, and that acts basically like a sponge. So, water on a sponge absorbs the water and then it's slowly released. So apparently it should take a whole week for a river to rise after heavy rain in this slow release system. So tree planting, and there are so many different types of trees that you can be planting in food forests, are great ways of meeting both needs for human food as well as needs for flood management and biodiversity. So this is a question to you guys. Do you think that the current education system is preparing us for what is to come into the future? And whilst I'm waiting for those answers to come in, I'll just show you a picture here. This is a permaculture garden I created in a school in Twynham, which is near me here in Galloway in southwest Scotland. You can see that this was just short grass, so there was very little diversity, probably about 2 or 3 species living in this very short grass, which is so common in UK playgrounds. And we've created a peace garden, actually. It's in the style of a food forest, so it's got the different layers. You can see the trees here are small because we just planted them. This is within the first year or so. Yeah, you can see there's rhubarb and nasturtiums and brassicas, and they're in a circle. A lot of times people create school gardens and they're very much in squares, straight lines, because it's easier because wood comes in straight lines. But here we go. We created a lovely circle for the children wanting to play and run around and through. And we're using, upcycling tractor tires. It's in a rural area. There's plenty of tractor tires, like old ones. And this is a peace pole, which says, "May peace prevail on earth," in 4 different languages. So it shows how we can use different languages and, use the garden for learning so much more. You might think, well, how would you use the garden for learning languages? Well, here you go. There's lots of different languages, use of the garden even for different languages and dynamic. I'm just reading your questions now. So, is it good for the environment, the venom plants, because it can kill? In the UK, there aren't any plants that would kill people. Every plant, every species has its place. I know sometimes people like, oh, well, what about this? Everything has its place and is part of the natural systems. And natural systems have a huge diversity, and that diversity is what makes them strong, is what makes them resilient. So if there's a problem with one, there's a I'm just reading the next one. Yeah. So venomous plants, they have a system. I'm curious what plants, but there's probably ones that don't live in the UK, so I might not know them, the venomous plants. So people are all saying no. It says no, no, no. We don't feel like the current system, education system, is preparing us for the future that it holds. These are some of the things, pictures of things that I've done with children. So permaculture is about design. It's design for sustainable living. So on the top left here, you can see us getting involved in designing. It surprised me when I went to this. You can see this is the school grounds. This is school there. Huge sort of grassy area, and I asked the children who played there, some of them every day for 7 years, where the sun is at lunchtime, and they all pointed in different directions. So there's just a lack of really knowing basic things about our planet, like where the sun is, where it sits and rises, and that's different in the winter and the summer. And that there's so much that we can learn together through designing, through careful observation of nature, which we can do in all these different ways. And these guys are doing a soil test, so that if you find out what kind of soil you have, you're going to be able to choose plants that are more likely to grow well in that. So that's more sort of system. Yeah, the Peace Garden's a sign as well. So all areas of the curriculum can be explored outdoors, and I feel there is so many benefits of outdoor learning. You can see here again, we're designing admittedly indoors, but that's just because we had been outside doing all these observations and then pulling that together inside. Tree planting, again, from an early age, is something that anyone can be doing. Growing food can be done in food forests and can be done in polytunnels. That's not to say that permaculture is only about food forests. Indeed, this is a polytunnel in which we've grown a diversity of different types of plants every year. This is the outdoor classroom I showed you a picture of earlier, just when we first built that and then planted the trees around the edges. Here we're making a film as well. And down at the bottom here, we're making pumpkin jam on the open fire from pumpkins that we've grown ourselves. So there's a lot of benefits of outdoor learning. You can see that this study in 2016 found that there's lots of positive impacts of outdoor learning. It's about making lessons more enjoyable, improving social skills, health and well-being, more fun, basically, and has a positive impact on behaviour. And of course, leads to a greater understanding of nature. We are part of nature. We humans are part of nature. We're integrated in nature. And for us not to know anything about nature is going to be a problem, both for now and into the future. I don't know if you've heard about the Lost Words, which was a book that was made when they changed the dictionary. They took out a bunch of words, the children's English dictionary. They took out a lot of words that were to do with nature and put in a lot of words that are to do with technology, just as exemplifying that people aren't learning about the basics, like what a dandelion is and other plants that are very common in our country. And actually, understanding nature is more than learning to name the plants. It's like the name is just a gateway so you can talk about it. So for example, a dandelion is a dynamic accumulator. That means it's good for your soil. It's accumulating the nutrients from the soil and actually makes those nutrients available to the other plants in your area. And it's a great bee plant. So benefits of outdoor learning. Children enjoy the lessons, feel healthier, happier, get on better, think they achieve more. Not sure whether they learnt more or not, but it's a different type of learning. Often classroom-based learning is often very much sort of focused on what we call head learning. So learning, memorizing things and learning how things works, and mathematical and scientific sort of head learning. And outdoor learning tends to be more holistic. That means integrating head, heart, hand, and even eyes, observational learning through all the senses. So you might not think you're learning because learning is normally a head thing, whereas can be a hand thing, like learning how to saw or feeling empowered to saw, to use a saw, to use gardening tools. And there's gross and fine motor skills that you develop through that, as well as the empowerment. We need to be learning how to be growing our own food. Everybody needs to be learning that, because we don't know what the future holds. Yeah, I talked about the ethics. This is a sign that the children made at the school above the compost heap about how composting, which is such an important part of any garden, and therefore people's lives, is all about integrating the earth care, people care, and fair share through making compost, which you then can feed the plants, and therefore you're making things into a cycle. So in permaculture, we're really trying to cycle as much as possible. So where the outputs of one system becomes the inputs to the next system. So in this example, there's an apple core, for example. Now you think, oh, well, I'll just chuck that away. If you put that in the landfill site, it gives off methane, and actually is a problem in terms of carbon emissions and climate change, 4 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So it's a real problem to throw your green waste, your biodegradable waste, into the landfill site. So you make a compost heap, and then you're actually literally looking after the earth. So you're taking care of the earth, as in the soil, because that biodegrades down and makes this humus, this very rich material that you can put on your soil and use to feed your plants, and then therefore to feed yourself and have more nutrients. It's also about having fun. Permaculture is definitely included in having fun. So if it's not fun, it's not sustainable. That's worthwhile bearing in mind in, when you're thinking. You can't keep doing something that isn't enjoyable. So make it fun. You can see the kids here are playing and dancing. This is designing the school garden, getting in the local paper as well. And this is a nice picture showing a child and giving a tour to a group of adults, visiting adults, a tour of their food forest. So this tree here is an alder tree. Alder trees actually fix nitrogen, so they make nitrogen available to the other plants that are growing there. So they're really useful to have in your garden. A little bit more about the Children in Permaculture project. This is our website. We've actually created loads of really useful resources which you can have a look at. There's about 800 different activities that you can do just to give you ideas, so you can set off and go and do fun things together. There's case studies, and yeah, there's a bunch of videos as well. This is the curriculum that we wrote. That's the page numbers in the book that I mentioned earlier, which was really useful. So the main sort of themes of things, if you're learning about permaculture, we are in the process of developing a course for children. So contact me if you're interested in that. So about these different themes of introducing permaculture, about living nature, design, growing food, built environment, resource use, and social permaculture. So finding peace. When we talk about the peace garden, we think about finding peace in myself, finding peace with other people, and finding peace with nature. And we also do various training courses, which are currently all online. This is the book I've mentioned, and you can actually read the book for free online, or you can buy a paperback one. Yeah, this is a short film which you can see on the website. I won't play it just now. So people down South Coast and in London, I'm thinking you might be interested in seeing places that are examples of permaculture in action. So there is an active network called the Land Project, Learning and Network Demonstration Centres, where you can go and visit. This is a person who's doing permaculture. There are people in London, Ian Solomon, he's doing permaculture in London. There's actually quite a few. There's lots in Brighton as well. So yeah, check out the Land Project. It's on the website permaculture.org.uk/land, and you will find out where there are places that you can visit to find out more about permaculture and actually see it in action. Even get your hands dirty, volunteer, and actually get doing practical work. I'm sure anyone would love to hear from you. So this at a land centre in Glasgow with worms. It's all about feeding the worms. So what is our vision? The Children in Permaculture vision is of a world in which humans are living in harmony with each other and nature, and all children can access an education based on the ethics of earth care, people care, and fair share. So I was asked to give you an action. What could you go do? You could go plant a tree. But I think that there's benefits of any native species of tree, but what about thinking out of the box? What about fruit or nut trees? So many different types of fruits that you could plant. Obviously, people think of apple trees and pear trees and cherry trees as a first stop, but there's so many more. So what about medlars and plums, for example? Nut trees could be walnuts or hazelnuts. And then surround it with beneficial plants. Plants so small, you could just have a metre square. It doesn't have to be a big area. Could be just pulling up some paving slabs and putting a tree in and surrounding it with beneficial plants. So plants that are good for bees. Like there's lots of plants that have really big flowers that the bees love. Plants that fix nitrogen, like of clover, I mentioned alder, legumes like peas and beans. They're great because they're fixing nitrogen and you can eat them. So that's another example of a beneficial plant. What about dandelions? Great. Comfrey, again, they're great at bringing up nutrients and making them available to the other plants. So second one here is join the Teach the Future campaign. I imagine that's already been spoken about, but these are the worldwide leaders' actions to be done. So I would, this is my call, if you like, to worldwide leaders. I would like them to stop subsidizing farming, which harms the planet. So the whole system, those monocultures that I showed you a picture of, where there's like huge areas of land just growing one crop, the reason that happens is because the government actually pays the farmers to do that. If they stopped paying the farmers to do that and only pay the farmers for doing polycultural systems which actually help regenerate the earth, which support diversity, all biodiversity, that would be massive. That would make a massive difference. The second is to transform the education system. So this is from the Teach the Future campaign. It was on the last slide. So it's about changing the education system. So including the climate emergency and ecological crisis and teacher training. Teachers don't feel fully equipped to teach this stuff. So we need to support them. Also to create a Climate and Biodiversity Emergency Education Act and to increase the priority for sustainability in schools inspections. So these are my contact details. I think there's just a couple of minutes left. Is there any questions?
We've had some lovely questions come in. I think you should be able to see them in your chat box.
Oh. Scroll down, that was the question. Thank you. How can schools become more eco-friendly? There's so many things that schools can do to be more eco-friendly in terms of improving school grounds. So planting trees, obviously if you've got an asphalt like tarmac playground, you can put them in planters. I think the first thing you need to do is just to be more conscious, to start thinking about it. Another question here is, how can my school do more gardening? So there's so much of the curriculum that you can learn through being outdoors. There's an element of doing the gardening. There's also just being outside. They say the best fertilizer for a garden is the gardener's shadow, which means not that the shadow itself is good, but that being in the garden just means that you're likely to do stuff whilst you're there. So go out for literacy, go out to write poetry, take inspiration from the nature around you. What are good trees to plant in schools? So all native trees are good to plant in schools. So in the UK, can be things like oak trees, or, what about a rowan tree? Rowan's exciting because it's a native species that has these red berries on it that you can then harvest some of the berries, leave some for the birds, take some, make jelly out of. Apple trees, fantastic for making all sorts of jams and jellies and just eating. We import all these apples from places like New Zealand. So yeah, any food growing that you can do in your school, the better. How can I convince teachers to do more lessons outside? I've got a whole PowerPoint I can send you about the benefits of outdoor learning. So if it's of interest, you could send them my way. How can I, same with getting your teachers to transform your school grounds. I think it's so important. It's so much that you could do to improve school grounds. Yes, so someone else would really love to grow a vegetable garden. What if your school doesn't have space? So I appreciate some schools are, especially inner city schools, have very small outdoor areas. It's surprising how much you can grow. Last year we planted trees. It suggests there might be spaces in between the trees. When trees are young, they're very small, and you can actually grow other things like herbs or perennial vegetables and salads actually in between the different trees. So think about what you can grow in between and get really creative. It's like, is there railings? A lot of schools have railings at the front that you could actually have really long, thin beds alongside, like window boxes, for example. And you'd be surprised how much you can grow in actually quite a long, thin space, like, peas and beans growing up fencing. So pack it in, get as creative, go in, a plant doesn't take up a huge amount of space. So thinking about how to use the little space that you do have as well as possible. And my top tip would be to start small. Is don't plow up a huge field and then wonder how you're ever going to manage to control it all. Start at your own back door. Start where you walk every day, between wherever the entrance to the school grounds is and this front door. Where that's walked, that's where you're walking every day. That's what you're seeing every day. That is a good place to start your garden. So make it easy for yourself. Okay, so I think that's us all. So thank you, everybody. I hope that that was useful, and I look forward to hearing from you.